Hello, welcome to episode 3 of our little series on beginning React. In the first 2 episodes, we built a rather trivial application. In this third video, we are going to connect to an API and display information gained from an API. So let's get started with React.new. We're going to continue building on CodeSandbox. We're going to use an API called the YesNo API. You can find it on this big list of free and open public APIs. And if you were to look at this YesNo API, what does it do? It's rather simple. You can just hit this little URL right here, yesno.wtf/API. And every time you reload this page, you can get a new answer with a new GIF. For example, here's a GIF that you're seeing right here. Every time we reload this page, you'll get either yes or no. And here's an example of somebody saying no. That's basically what it is. You go to this URL, and what you get back is data. APIs are generally considered to be web services. They give you back data rather than HTML or anything like that. So we're at React.new. So let's maybe change our heading over here to say yes, no. Yes, no, and maybe we can just start adding in a few new components. I think we're going to add in a button component and a display component. But before we do that, let's remember to hit save so that we can actually fork the React template from CodeSandbox, rename it to something useful like yes, no, and make sure we go into our package.json and change our name and our description to something a little bit more readable. While we're at it, index.html should have its title changed to yes or no, something like that. We can hit save, close that up, and we'll just be working in app.js for a bit. Okay. All right, so what should it look like? We should have a button to ask a question and a little area where we're going to display the answer in. So perhaps rather than an H1, why don't we just put in a button component here? We'll call that we'll call this an ask component or an asker component, and then we'll have down here an answer component over here. We should define find these two components, right? So what's an asker function? Well, let's make function asker right now is just going to return perhaps a button that says yes or no. This would be a good start here. And what should an answer be? Function answer. Well, the answer, we're going to display the image that we get from the API. So for right now, let's just return a figure. Okay. And this will be good to start. We have a yes, no button. It doesn't actually do anything right now. Okay. So what should the yes or no button do? Well, it should go fetch an answer from the API. So let's say that the action for the button, let's parameterize asker, where the action is to fetch some data. When you fetch data from an API, what you get back is usually a big object of some sort. This is like an info object or a data object. Sometimes it's hard to come up with a good name for these sorts of things. We could call it I'll just call it a data object. I mean, it's kind of easy enough. So what we're going to do then is make a state variable. And in React, we always make our state variables in pairs. So let's use state, and let's just say that it's basically an empty object. And we need to import use state from React. Import use state from React. There we go. Okay. All right. It didn't break anything. That's good. All right. So what kind of data do we display? Well, if the data has both an answer part and an image part. So if we have data, if the data doesn't exist, then we should say that there's no answer yet, right? So I think we want to say something like, if there's no data, Oh, by the way, where are we going to get this data from? Remember, data is a state variable here. We have to pass it in to answer. So let's say data let's pass it in as data, and answer will hold data here. If we don't have any data, then there's nothing to display. So we can say something like, if we don't have data, then we'll just display maybe nothing. Maybe we'll display an empty paragraph. But if we do have data to display, then we should probably show the data inside of an image element. So image src. And right in here, we're going to put in our data dot, is it image? I think the URL is data, yeah, data.image. And then alt is probably some kind of a meme. Okay, that'll be good. In fact, I think that if we don't have if we should probably be a little bit more resilient. If we don't have any image property in our data, then we should show nothing. Otherwise, we'll show the meme. Okay, if not data, why is this showing now? Oh, because I put all this stuff in the figure. That's totally not what I wanted to do. I wanted to put this out here. I wanted to say, if we don't have any data, show an empty paragraph. Otherwise, show a figure with the meme in it. Okay, that's what we want to do. All right, now how are we going to get this data into our answer component? Well, we have to click the button. So when we click the button, some action needs to take place. What is it that we want to do? So as usual, we take our React input elements and we parameterize them with some sort of an action and attach that to onClick. Okay. So what action do we want to have take place? Action equals what? Well, we want to fetch from the API. So let's just say fetch from API. And let's implement fetch from API here. So function fetch from API. Well, what is the URL that we want to fetch from? That is, we go over here, we see it's just this thing right here. So I copy this over. This needs to be in quotes. And then what we do is we use the JavaScript function fetch to fetch from the URL. After it is fetched, we can take the response that we get back, we can turn it into a JavaScript object. And the JavaScript object that we get back is going to be the value of data. So then we'll just call set data. So whatever we get back is immediately going to be passed to set data. And now we have data set with a value. And now once data is set, it's automatically going to trigger a re-rendering of this answer component. And the answer component says, well, if you have a data image, we're going to write it in. So if I hit yes or no over here, there we go. Look what I got. I see this extra colon right there. I'm going to remove that. I'm going to hit the button again. And somebody here is saying, it's this guy saying no. I click it again. Take some time to load. It's probably not the fastest API. Let's click yes or no again. There's someone saying it. You can see the images aren't always the same size. So it's kind of nice sometimes to, like put in a little, you can put in a little style right here and say, I'll just call it image style. And then we can over here say image style is an object that says the width is maybe 300. We'll keep the width at 300 pixels. And now, no matter how big the image was, it's always going to be about the same size, right about 300. So there's a couple of no's coming back. Here's looks like a yes, and we'll do one more. And that's it. We've successfully connected to an API. As usual, as we saw in the first two episodes, it might be a good idea to take your asker and your answer and drop them into separate files if needed. When dropped into separate files, you can also take these styles and you can break out the styles into their own files and import them this way. For this simple little project, it's okay to drop everything in one file. But generally speaking, again, asker will be in its own file, maybe its own folder along with its own styles. rather than putting the styles in like this. I just realized that not putting const in the way was a really, really bad idea if I'm defining variables. So I just cleaned them up. See, she does not actually approve. Okay, yeah, doesn't approve. Yeah, always make sure to make your local variables define as constant. Okay, so that's it for episode 3. We're going to make a much more complicated app in episode 4, which is coming up next. We're going to get input from text fields, and we're also going to hit an API. In fact, we're going to hit a new API, which should be interesting. I'll see you then.